Welcome to another edition of Indie Talk, Dunseith Debacle style. We're back. People have been asking about it. Well, here's your answer. We're back with it right now. Once again, joined by Charles Hoefer. Charles, one of the things you really love is my little disclaimer I have at the front, so I'll just mention it really fast.
Go for it.
Stuff that we're talking about today. A lot of it's been presented to us by Charles Hoefer. We have not independently verified it, but
it's real.
It's real. All right, so if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to us.
Please.
Thanks for joining us today, Charles.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Obviously, last time we talked, it was a lot of evidence, and then we did a live stream. And now we're going to more some of the recent happenings that are taking place in what we've deemed a debacle in Dunseith. And so you're going to kind of take us down a little bit of down the road of what your interactions with Commerce has been and with the North Dakota state government side of things this time.
Yeah, I think episode 4, we talked verbally about some of the Commerce things, but we pretty much left the last year hanging in the balance.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a recent meeting in December, and you guys have talked about some letters that have come out in support of us independently. And there have been records that the state isn't turning over that have been paid for. So there's a lot of interesting happenings that continue to cause us harm and damage and impede our ability to just run our business, which is what we want to do.
Right. Imagine that. Those letters can be found at mydakotan.com. You can go there. Kyler Column has a little column that kind of addresses some of those letters that got sent to the governor's office. Grabbed his attention maybe partially, got at least a senator in front of him.
Yeah, Senator Weston met with the governor. No one in almost 2 weeks now has even acknowledged me. I've sent some friendly messages, sent emails, had legislators motivate requests, and I'm still waiting to hear back.
So while we might not have any public comment from the governor or his office yet, he is at least privately acknowledging that the situation is at least exist.
Yeah, I believe Senator Weston is pitching a bill for an independent out-of-state investigation into commerce. And after, receiving letters from economic corporations who are lending with us, from about 18 legislators who signed on to Senator Weston's investigation into commerce and what happened with our project, I think it's becoming much harder to say, oh, Charles is making these facts up, because other people are now alleging facts they experienced, which mirror and parallel the actions that were taken against us.
Independent investigation sounds exciting. What's your thoughts? That's good progress, right?
Are you leading me in to talk about the Montana investigator for
That's
the
up to
deleted
you.
Attorney General's emails?
Sounds like I did.
Where he had no subpoena power, and therefore the state did not cooperate, and he finished his 100 and some page report, and who knows how much waste of taxpayer dollars to say that the state's either a witness or victim, but either way they're not telling, and he can't figure it out.
It's crazy stuff. I know that there is a request for public information out to the state as well right now, concerning some emails and other documentation that was passed back and forth. And last we heard, which was
over the weekend,
yeah, that request has not been completed yet, and it's been several weeks. The state requested
2 months, I think.
Yeah, the state requested some money for it because it's standard procedure. If it takes over a certain amount of time, then typically you have to pay for it just for retrieving the documents. And so I know that that's been paid, but there's not been any continuation of support there. To
summarize that, they gave 256 pages, and of those pages, a couple of them have some smoking guns that you would only know if you knew the rest of the hidden documents. And then they said there were 200 more to go. I've given you guys already on your website about 400 that they haven't given anybody yet.
It's crazy.
So I probably have another 500 and maybe more. And then they would have internal records additionally. So their estimate that there are 200 records on me that exist that they have not released appears to be woefully inadequate.
In the words of the great Ben Shapiro. Facts don't care about your feelings.
They don't. So this all kind of stems from the recent meeting that took place last month. It was between members of the Commerce Department and some state legislators. You weren't
Which I sat outside of for 2 hours waiting to be invited in and was not invited in.
Did you, before we get into the depths of the meeting, did you end up having conversation with anyone from Commerce that day? Or
no.
Were you, okay.
They walked past me,
Fair.
but they did not acknowledge me.
Fair. So you want to, before we dive into do you want to just dive into it, or do you want to summarize the meeting?
The meeting was a debacle. I mean, it was an almost 2-hour meeting filled with lies and inaccuracies and false statements and misrepresentations and material omissions. I was given a recording of the meeting that was made by a legislator who said if Charles isn't in the room, then he should know what's going on. And I was requested by legislators to provide feedback. So recently we completed the feedback, which ended up being about a 62-page document filled with over 75 material lies and misrepresentations and material omissions documented by actual records. And in the 62-page report, each time something was said that was false or needed to be corrected by documents, we provided reference to where all the documents existed, and we've offered to the legislators to make them available since they're obviously not being made available by the state.
Sure, and that leads to the PowerPoint presentation that you put forward today. And that kind of, it doesn't, obviously we don't have all 75 new distinct instances that came from the meeting. You went and picked out and highlighted a few of the most important ones.
A few of the most important ones, and when we did episode 4, we didn't have the time to dive into some of the actual recordings. And as we'll hear later, one of the arguments that the chairman of the Development Fund has laid out is that he chooses, I guess, to only listen to one side. He doesn't reach out to me. He talks to the Commerce staff only, and he says he hasn't heard any recordings, and we'll hear him say that today, even though Commerce has had recordings, and we've sent them recordings over a year ago. So they've chosen not to listen to those recordings or provide the recordings. I'm not sure which. Mm-hmm. But we think it's important that people know what's said so that, yes, the North Dakota Commerce officials can be made aware of the recordings if they're being hidden from them, and so that the governor's office can be made aware of the recordings, because they expressed concern to Senator Weston that it would potentially take them a long time to verify the claims in our 62-page report. Senator Weston alleged it could be done in under an hour to figure out that we have been treated absolutely terribly and that there are wrongs still outstanding against us. My goal is that in under an hour today, we make it abundantly clear.
Well, if you're ready, and Jonathan, if you're ready, why don't we dive into it then?
Hey, Kyler, I'll go wherever you go.
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
All right. What one you want to pull up first, sir?
Just start on the first slide, I think.
Sure.
Or the first slide is the caught in the act. There's my title. How's that?
Self-titled by Mr. Charles Hoefer.
So maybe go to the second slide. Okay. I think this one, it lays out some really important baselines here, right? So April 2022, we buy the factory, immediately start running into crimes. I mean, it was just like, as soon as we buy it,
Mm-hmm.
there's interference into the property, the business, alarm stuff going funny, sabotage on the property. I mean, just it starts to get weird right away. Then by August, at the beginning of August, in the first week, the commissioner, former Commerce Commissioner Teagan, and Shaden Akison, who's still head of investments for Commerce, they tell us, start investigating. And they give us access to BCI. They promise full support.
Sure.
Everything goes in. Then September 2022, amongst a lot of things, including missile parts and nuclear files, we find gyros.
Sure.
We didn't know then, almost a year later, that was the state's project.
Mm-hmm.
They freeze our loans. A whole bunch of weird things happen. I mean, my credit and debit cards get frozen, flagged for fraud in my hometown. My phone stops working. My email stops working. They cut off communication with me, and then the U.S. State Department from DC arms control for U.S. weapons regulation tells me you report to us from now on, you're probably being subjected to a cover-up. And within under a day, I get a call from Commerce, and they say, oh, we made a knee-jerk reaction and a mistake. And then they say, we'll put your loans back, but, just do what we say in the reporting and follow along. And there's all kinds of documentation showing that, most of which is already on your website. So then we go to, October to July. We clean up the site with Commerce hand in hand, but we don't actually know that they're associated with the crimes. They conceal it from us, and when we're trying to understand how it got there, who was behind it, they had records that they actually emptied out of a database and showed me an empty database and claimed they had no history with the site after 2015. So then, go to July, August 2023. We're being praised for our progress. We're doing great.
Yep, you have your soft opening then, and that was right after you had on-site collections take place from the...
It was a celebration of, oh, great, the missiles are off the factory. We can start bringing people in here and actually, do what we came to do, because we don't have to worry about people getting charged for some national security crime because we can't get rid of this detritus. So then in August 23, after we obtain the Commerce records, then the IRS Crimes Unit wants the records and wants to distribute and connect with all the other agents in their investigations. And then immediately we start raising questions of conflicts with Commerce and fears of retaliation, and they just stop concealing and they start retaliating, which has been ongoing ever since. They've made accusations. They've audited and then abandoned the audit. I mean, they audited us with the sole intention of trying to prove themselves right in a preemptive misuse accusation that they knew was wrong to begin with. And then now they just wrecked the business. So ignore all our partners. Did it again right before Christmas. Actually, just before we did that last podcast with you guys, they wrecked another deal. And that's confirmed by a legislator who participated in that meeting and by another lender of ours in emails. So, yeah.
That kind of catches everyone up to the...
That's the catch up.
Which is the interesting part, because basically this is the part that doesn't make sense to me, is that there's deals that basically you'd be getting with other lenders that might be freeing their position.
Millions of dollars was on the table at the beginning of 2024. And I was so excited about Armstrong coming in because his chief of staff, Roz, was talking with Senator Weston for weeks and saying she was following the podcast and knew what was going on.
Yeah.
The scope of the problem is extraordinary. And the fact that they hunker down and hide from it all shows how bad it is. But it's affecting communities.
Yeah.
It's affecting taxpayers. It's affecting jobs in the Turtle Mountains and high-paying jobs that we would be offering. And we had deals many times over since the start of the year, many of them over $5 million, many of them that would have tandemed to get us anywhere from 8 to 12. And Commerce has a little $2 million loan that they gripe about for an RV company when other RV companies take 20, 30 million or more to get going.
Would the other 8 to 12 million free their position?
One of the deals, the group was so intent to get rid of them that they were proposing a buy-off of the loan.
Gotcha.
And that deal had two different ways it could have been structured. And when we entered into discussions with Commerce on a recorded call, 3 officials from Commerce started accusing us of misusing loan funds and saying that's why they were defaulting our perfectly good loan.
Interesting.
Yep.
So does that take us into the next slide then?
Yeah, the next slide we can jump right through, and it's basically just to prove documents exist that we were directed by Commerce and Remediation, because that's the argument they tried to levy misuse against us, is to say, oh, he wasn't allowed to do it. Well, first of all, by the loan agreement, I wouldn't have even needed to ask their permission. I could have just remediated the site and never asked. But because they were extorting and freezing my loans and telling me you need to do it our way, I did it every step of the way with them. So our U.S. State Department Arms Control report acknowledges and thanks Commerce at the beginning of the report for allowing the legal fees and the time and budget and cost to go into creating that report and for the efforts in remediation. You're going to hear a recording from the FBI today in an interview where we talk about Commerce directing us in a very expensive course of remediation. There is an email that I have made on your website, public already, with a bank discussing Jessica Took, the Development Fund CEO, giving us instructions how to clean up, what to do, process that takes more time and money. There's a recording we'll hear today where Jessica Took says that the head of investments knows all of the instructions being given to me. There is an email that I provide to the head of investments explicitly detailing the instructions in remediation provided by the NDDF CEO. Now, she's not the janitor, as Senator Weston likes to say. She's the person who signed parts of my loans. She's the person who I made requests of funds from, and she's the person who would go through my accounts during remediation and tell me what to do. So then you have me asking for funds to replace the remediation costs because I followed her instructions, and she said if I did that, they would take care of us, and she offered. So those are the things that prove that this all happened and happened under their watch.
Right.
And instruction. Mm-hmm. And approval.
They were not just instructing, but at that time walking you hand in hand through every step of the process, effectively.
In fact, I believe there's a text message from Jessica Took to another Commerce employee that actually says, I'm literally holding Charles by the hand and we're making progress.
Okay. Oh, my. Mm-hmm. Like I said, facts don't care about your feelings.
They do not. They do not at all.
Yeah.
And that takes us to...
My bad. I hit the wrong button, honestly. I was wanting to show our beautiful faces again.
Bring us back. You were getting ahead of the curve.
Too much PowerPoint, so
That's all right.
Yeah.
We'll go to the next slide. How about that?
Maybe the facts were getting tired.
Yeah, the facts were getting tired.
So first up, we have... So
this is an interview. There's a quote. Jessica is literally sitting next to me in the room with a FAA senior national security investigator and FBI. And in part of my quote, I say Jessica has been asking me to just go step by step by step by step through the chain, meaning the law enforcement reporting chain through low tier and up, which is like the opposite of what you're supposed to do. It's been financially very, very painful. So do you want to can you hit play on audio one?
Let's go ahead and do it. And just an FYI, we have several images here that are going to look similar to the one you'd see. Basically what it is there are
images who's talking and then who's part of being either talked about or part of that conversation. So Jessica is literally in the room on this audio. If
you are interested in hearing this full recording, which in some cases you will, or full email, which in some cases you will, we have that full documentation if you're like, hey, let me see the full thing.
I haven't put the whole, there's some pretty sensitive stuff discussed in the FAA, FBI interviews. Yeah. So, I mean, we have clips of it that's online.
I should clarify. I was talking more about the emails where we can supply the whole, I think.
I've got a ton of emails and I've got some pretty detailed law enforcement reports and crime scene reports as well from law enforcement.
Here's a clip for this one.
Okay.
Who you've all gone through so I can figure out if I need to talk to anybody.
Trying to use that chain of and this is where I'll say Jessica has been asking me to just go step by step by step by step through the chain so that I don't just end up on Fox News getting discredited by the government as a MyPillow guy or something like that. So we've been carefully plodding away. It's been financially very, very painful, but we've been doing it. So she's in the room. She's my lender. I'm repeatedly being threatened my loans will be pulled. That's the kindest way I can possibly tell the FBI if I go contact media or make a report or make this public, I'm getting my loans frozen and I'm getting chased out of here.
Yeah.
And they made that abundantly clear to me several times over.
Crazy.
Yeah, that just shows where it starts. So, the inaccuracies begin.
Yeah,
next.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll go to the next slide.
So, yeah, you want to play it?
All right, let's go grab it.
The investment, once the board approves it, the board has no say over it, and it now falls back onto me. And I have every say of what we're doing and how we're moving forward. Now, the board still has right to question and want to know. And like I said, and I can share as much or as little with them as I would like. So that's where, like I said, I've had conversations. Shaden is fully aware of what is going on and what's taking place. And, I make sure, like, how much of this are we going to share? How much should we be sharing? And like I said, so we only shared what we feel is enough that they need to know. And like I said, so they are fully updated that yes, you are behind, but it's completely okay from my perspective of where we're sitting at and how we're moving forward.
So as of June 12th, 2023, your conversation with Jessica Took, she alluded to not just the Development Fund Board being well aware of the situation, but also Shaden Akeson, correct?
Yeah, and Shaden had called me in January and said, do whatever Jessica tells you to do.
Okay.
And that was after they froze the loans, and he disappeared for months. And then he called me back and said, yes, we sent Jessica. You do what she says. And then he sort of pseudo-apologized for what had happened. And now he's just turned outrageously against us. This is important because in December with legislators, you'll hear just an outrageous lie he tells about what happened in June. You want to go to the next slide? Jessica wouldn't possibly tell me she's worried about insiders in Bismarck being involved in all this, would she?
Well, let's find out.
At that time, we just weren't communicating or speaking too publicly about what was actually happening and taking place because we weren't sure who may or may not have been involved. And so to me, when, it was more so you need to be informed if or if I'm not even sure, I'm not going to give people more information than they need.
That's a very nervous laughter from me because I had been dealing with nonstop stalking and various threats from both government officials as well as others. So, yeah, that was
nerve-wracking times.
Very much. But Jessica obviously knew it's crazy. So she and Shaden were perhaps keeping it on the down low with Tegan, with maybe not too many people in the state. I don't know.
Right.
That's up for them to share.
Yeah. Slide 7.
So this is an email, and this is important because Shaden later denies that he knew this. I had a discussion within a day of this email as well, covering the exact same topics. So he started getting centrally involved because Jessica had a family issue that was pulling away some of her time from work. And so here I write to Shaden on July 4, 2023, I stuck to NDDF's request, which is the Development Fund, to follow a law enforcement reporting process to completion, as opposed to going to media prior to evidence collections. It was extremely financially painful to follow this course. And this is the very next sentence. As Jessica was aware, burning over $700,000 towards facility renovations and legal fees that we planned to use for materials.
That will set back a budget a little bit.
It sets you back just a bit. In addition to that, we couldn't close the rest of our finance on the project, so we were millions in the hole.
Sure. Right.
So,
in your total outstanding loan with the NDDF was what amount? You've mentioned it before.
They've only dispersed $2,046,000 and change.
So $700,000 is a lot
of
money.
And they've promised us $3 million, and then we had millions more that would have topped us off to get the project running into gear. Because just inventory alone can cost that much.
Right.
So,
and the legal fees. I know that people, if you've been following along with this, listeners, if they've followed along, that they may have an understanding. But to clarify, the legal fees were not. You're trying out this product, it's new stuff, and there's another competitor that says, hey, that's actually our stuff, and you go to court to win this.
You get carried off to federal prison if you don't get the site cleaned up and you don't get the shipments to stop moving off your address. So the legal fees were working with authorities, cleaning the garbage off the site, and directed every single step of it.
It was directly tied to the site, which the NDDF said, hey, here's a good site for you.
Oh, yeah. And you'll hear a discussion on that later. Literally one of the commerce managers who, it turns out, had years of history at the site that he concealed from me, had sent me to the site, toured me through the site, helped broker it with the community, helped deal out the finance terms, and told me that nothing ever happened at the site after 2015. He lied straight to my face at the facility before I bought it.
Yeah, incredible.
So,
Moving on to slide 8.
Yeah, so
Another email.
Another part of the email, and the reason the last email and this part of the email are very important is because it's setting the stage for lies that were told just this December.
Okay.
So I say larger vendors need working out. When I started to explain it a few months back, the basic feedback was get the heck out of North Dakota and dump the facility on the state. Jessica has repeatedly stated that any other investor would have left. Having gone all in personally, I am not willing to ruin my reputation by leaving the site. I see long-term benefits. I am interested in getting all cylinders back financially as last year. Shaden and I had very careful discussions about that too.
Right. So there's a conversation that I believe we've already probably heard the recording, and we may hear it again today, about like other people saying that they would have just left. And part of it, you're caught in two spots where one, your life on paper is tied to a building.
It's tied to, I personally guaranteed everything. I mean, not just state loans, but every loan that I've got into this project and an overseas loan. So Everything was tied into this project.
And then your physical life is being threatened. So one life or the other.
I traveled out. Yeah. I mean, I traveled out this past year to go visit family. And the day I arrive at a house, someone shows up on a Sunday morning and tells me to stay.
Yeah. So a lot of random things. Either way, there's not a good outcome from leaving.
No. I talked to someone else who left the site before me, the group that had the bloody room. I found someone connected to that. Right. And they told me life was very difficult after leaving.
And there's some that you weren't able to talk to too.
I can't still find one of them.
Yeah, so it's not always promising leaving either.
No. One of those catch-22 situations.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Yep.
Well put. Move on to slide 9.
Yeah. So soft opening. Maybe you can, I don't know if you can zoom in. Maybe anybody who's watching this podcast, you can zoom in and see the grimaces and growls. Oh, wait, it's just nothing but smiles. I've later heard that this soft opening was a disaster, but every single Commerce employee there was absolutely thrilled. They couldn't believe that while we were stuck, we had completely gutted and rebuilt the entire facility, burning just a few $100,000 of additional cost and doing it in an extraordinary way so that, not that we just waste time and change the look of the building, so that we could immediately run a full volume line instead of a half volume line, because previously we could only use half the facility. We tore the rest of it out so that we could use the whole facility so that there would be no disruption in year 2 and 3 as we accelerated.
Just point out something in this picture that I think eyes take for granted, but when you actually think about it, it's pretty amazing. Basically, you have, how thick is a pallet?
2,000 pounds sticking of people standing on a 2-inch panel that weighs like 250 pounds.
And it's being elevated on 2 pallets that are
going to be 3 inches. 2 pallets with an 11-foot span, and that functions as a chassis.
Right.
I can't go into much more detail. There are full built units with full outer, casework done in the factory, and it's just...
it's a testament to the strength of...
We produce everything from raw chemical in the facility, and we've made several hundred panels just with the little bit of material we've had on site in Dunseith. I mean, and it's in a very exotic application. It's a manufacturing process we invented, and we have some specific materials that we're the only group in the United States that has, and we're the only one in the world.
So things were happening at the site, basically.
Oh, yeah. And everything we could possibly do, we did.
And you go back and look from that time, July of 2023, any of the media coverage that's going on is all positive at that point, too.
The Commerce Commissioner said great things. Canada was working on a joint project to relocate our overseas venture, and everything was moving along. And everybody was ready to get rolling. So then if you jump the next slide, this is Kim Schmidt. She's head of communications for Commerce. So here she's writing to me, once you've released this information, we'll promote and help spread the word. So they were repeatedly reaching out with Rich Garman, the ED&F, Economic Development and Finance Director, on copy. They were reaching out to me and they were saying, get some news coverage off this event.
Right.
My distributor was saying, this doesn't even matter. Don't even promote this thing until you've got a production line. Like, I was getting fought over with my distributor that this would be foolish to be promoting this. And so rather than pump it out national, we had said, okay, we can, do something local, and then the state can run it through commerce. That's fine. But they were pushing on us because they were so thrilled. And they had records from us saying, the release they wanted to approve said parts are now being made, units will be coming in the coming months. I mean, and, we had to put the financing back in and get everything running. They had an email saying our distributor had rejected the idea of doing even a few units, and we just needed to get a line in, because otherwise we look absolutely foolish and humiliated that we buy this big factory and then we've got like 3 or 4 units. You need a line so that you get buyers, so that you have credibility in the market.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on.
So here's an audio, and to be clear, last month they were talking about how much of a disaster July 2023 was. So here's an audio from real time, August 2023.
Shading called me afterwards and said that he thought that it went really great, that the board seemed to enjoy it, that even the community discussion, the soft opening was good. I heard nothing but good from that, and from everyone, not even just Sheeden, but like the whole EDNF team all reached out and said that it was a great experience and that they were happy to have gone, and that they all were amazed by how the place looked and things like that. And I was like, a tremendous amount of work and time has gone into it, and that you and your team have done amazing.
Can you just hear the undertones?
Right, yeah.
The undertones of how disappointed they are. I mean,
right, yeah.
And that's all coming from Jessica Took, who, again, had been with you step by step at that stage.
Who had authority over my loans at the point in time she said it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you feel like that was her just being nice?
No.
Trying to encourage you?
Everybody's message. I mean, the EDNF team and the Commerce Communications team was also reaching out at that time.
Right.
Trying to figure it out. Now, in the background, we had just come into possession of about 150 records showing that Commerce had been lying to us and concealing things on the site, and that the reason they were directing our remediation was because it was in their self-interest to control who and how we reported, and it was potentially putting us in increased danger. It was leaving the encumbrances on the site for months longer than it should have been, the way we could have cleaned it up. And it was costing us hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional money that they were ringing up on our bill because of their concealment. So we were sitting on those records trying to figure out how in the world do we bring this up to them, because we were terrified, because they had actually emptied a computer and showed me that they had no records, and now we know they did because they're state emails. And it was just crazy. What do you do? Mm-hmm. So then, I think was there another? I think we might have missed a slide back.
Well, let's find out.
Yeah. So here, skip audio 5 because it's 2 minutes long. It's on your website. So if anybody wants to see it, go to the August 14th emails where she's offering more money. But basically, on the face of the $750,000 request, I say, you had asked me, avoid media, go through the law enforcement channels, and if it starts to burn a hole in your wallet, then let's talk and figure that out. And she goes on to say, and there's 2 clips of recordings, she says, if it's literally explained in that, and she says some weird word, essence, but I think she meant either essence or aspect. So if it's literally explained in that aspect, that this is why this request is being made, the board's going to understand. This just helps get through what took place. It would just simply be scheduling a time frame for board approval. So if you want to play audio 6, that's the tail end of...
So, like I said, and I don't think I think the board would be completely understanding of it. I don't see an issue with it by any means, and I don't see that there be an issue for repayment, honestly. I think this just helps get through
we'd be able...
what took place. So, like I said, I don't see an issue with it. So, yeah, it would just simply be scheduling a time frame for board approval.
So, yeah. And then you can jump on to the next slide 13.
Well, I was really excited about that slide.
Yeah. No, so here, we were doing well, right? Until the day we weren't. And what happened, we found the records, unfortunately, that they were hiding from us. And one of the key lessons I've learned with at least the previous administration was if you find things they don't want you to find, you are their target.
Gotcha. They'll come for you. All right. So you find 100 records showing Commerce had concealed association to cite crimes, harming Hoefer in ways that increased cash burn and led to elevated safety risks, which we've kind of alluded to already.
And one thing real quick, just for a little clarification. Yeah, you say the last administration. Do you mean Josh Teagan at Commerce or Governor Burgum's administration, or both?
It would have been both.
Fair.
I mean,
okay.
Realistically, because we dealt with his chief of staff as well, and there was just interference.
Okay.
So, yeah. So then August 21st, 2023, IRS Criminal Investigations emails me a follow-up. They'd already been to the site months earlier. Can you please provide me with the Economic Development Agency documents you acquired? Also, can you provide me with the contact information for the other agents? I would like to contact them to ensure we don't conflict with each other. Sounds
IRS
like
cares.
Yeah, sounds like there's something going on, right? I mean, people like to allege that there were no investigations, no inquiries. That sounds active.
Yeah, it does sound a little bit active, for sure. Moving on to the next one.
So now we raised phone calls and we started asking guys, what do we do? And I called Rich Garman and said, Rich, do you know that I know that you guys had a history with the site? And he's the one who panicked.
Is Rich Garman on this slide?
His face isn't here because he didn't have a direct conflict with the site's past. Both Jim Albright, the chairman of the development fund, and Dave Lehman had various associations.
Jim Albright's on the left?
Yep, Lehman on the right.
Great.
Various associations with Benchmark and Tuttle, who were the subjects of the federal investigations in business. And Lehman himself was actually part of the project on the site that was being investigated. Okay. Albright had supply relationships with Benchmark through his company. Gotcha. So then, go ahead.
Go ahead. Do you want to play the clip or?
Yeah, in just a second. So just to set up then here. So Lehman, I start asking him questions just very politely, and he just clams up on it. He won't say a word. And then Took is like trying to explain it all away and say that, everybody's still behind and helping and everything. And then Garman tells me that ever since Dave spoke with agents, where I now know he lied to agents in 2023, he said Commerce met weekly to strategize how to handle my situation. But Took was my only contact.
Interesting.
So they, a little bit Lehman, a little bit Akison, mostly just Took. And they even started gaslighting me by July, and they started calling my site Small Town Issues and telling me every small town has them.
Nice.
And that was with Garman and a couple of his people. So, I mean, yeah, then...
That's what makes North Dakota legendary.
When we say, hey, we're pretty concerned that there's some conflicts here and that you guys might not be in a responsible position on the loan, I mean, at that point, it's just full-blown sabotage. So, yeah, you can go to 7 and 8. And this is just me in conversations with Jessica.
The only other thing that confused me is Jim, the board member for NDDF, the chairman, told me that he had no idea about any of the issues we were going through, that the only thing he knew, because he was meeting with Chris and I and asking what was going on and how things were, and he said that the only thing he knew was that there was just some local challenge. And we said, well, it's way beyond that, Jim. And when we told him, his face sunk and he said, no investor should ever have to do any of what you've gone through. And then he asked about who was involved, and when we told him Tuttle, and then he goes, oh yeah, he said, so he was helping, and we said, no, he was leading. And then his face sunk again and he wasn't interested in much further discussion. He admitted to us, not admitted, but he told us that he's a supplier to Benchmark.
Oh.
And so he said he used to supply the Dunseith site, and then he currently supplies their Minnesota projects. And apparently he knows Tuttle pretty well.
Okay.
Good to go. And good. Next one.
In mind,
I count Dave as a friend. I think that this bit him in the butt really hard because I think he made a misrepresentation to me, thinking that it would just never, come out.
So Jessica's acknowledging that Lehman lied about the site, about what happened there, and then was just hoping it wouldn't surface.
Yeah.
And in less than 2 months, she's turning on me.
Wow. Sure.
So
going from your main proponent to one of the biggest adversaries in a very short time frame.
And we're almost done with the slides so that everyone can see our beautiful faces for the rest of the episode. A few more, though.
Very pink face.
Yeah. Well, it follows you around, buddy.
It does.
Hopefully we're on the right one.
Maybe.
Probably not.
Is there? Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we're on the right one.
Yeah, we're almost at the end. So here, I from September until the present day, I've been cut off from access to every single board meeting of the development fund, who is lending to me at just over $2 million.
Wow.
Typically, when an investor, especially one being lent to, requests to present to the board, they can get on within a month. So here, Akeson has now changed a position on the development fund in the meeting minutes, advising the board members that they should let the staff deal with the applicants from now on. And then you can go to the next slide. So here, on September 27, I had various developers from across the state figuring out why I had wholesale cutoff of communication with Commerce. They come back to me and they tell me, well, Tegan has nothing good to say about you, neither Garmin. And basically, they were just smearing me. And I asked, what are they saying? And they're saying that you're going to sue them and that they're cutting you off forever. And so I said, okay. So I send an email and I say a third party told me Commerce has cut off communications because I am somehow alleged to have threatened a lawsuit. Will you please clarify whether there's any truth to this, and if so, why no one has contacted us to seek a clarification that this is not the case so that we continue communications? And I go on to say which are essential at this point, pointing out the giant pink elephant in the room, that I fear conflicts and retaliation, and that I fear Commerce might act to preserve its own interests relating to our reporting, is also not a threat of a lawsuit. It may, however, expose that Commerce is no longer in a responsible position to uphold its lending contract. The facts remain that we would not have bought our site had Dave informed us about the truth of it.
And right there's the key part.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
The site would not have been purchased if we actually knew what was going on.
No.
Then perhaps.
Which means the loan was fraudulently induced, because Dave can argue that he didn't have responsibility in terms of the site purchase itself, but he did have responsibility structuring the lending.
Then one quick clarification again, just so we have.
Dave Lehman.
Okay. In the picture we have from left to right, it's Garmin, Akeson, Lehman, and Took, correct?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
So they were all on copy to that email.
Very good. Moving on.
Now we're almost at the end. So now you'd think Shaden has that email on September 27th, right? He is understanding that I am explicitly clear there's no threat of lawsuit. He wouldn't possibly go lie to the Development Fund Board and tell them, also he has threatened to pursue a civil lawsuit against the Department of Commerce stating NDDF, bless you.
Yes, those aren't good.
And so I feel that way every time I read this sentence as well.
There you are.
NDDF is not supportive of his project. So here is publicly slandered and defamed me, saying in a board minute something completely false, alleging I'm making threats when I never made a threat, alleging I'm threatening a lawsuit, which I never threatened. And the only thing true, he said, was that, I asked for what they promised, because they promised the extra funds and I asked for it per their promise.
Right.
And then apparently I'd like to see the record of me threatening lawsuit.
Well, actually, that's been requested.
Yeah, it's never going to come out because the record itself does not exist.
Right.
So that is a false statement. So here, Y is ahead of Investments for Commerce, which, by the way, is a multi-$100 million agency controlling hundreds of millions of dollars in investments.
Mm-hmm.
Why is he making a false statement about a lender involving taxpayer money?
Right. Absolutely.
So
moving on.
Here, Akeson sent an email to Senator Bob Paulson from Minot, and Bob was very courteous to forward it to me in November of 2023, trying to get feedback from my perspective. And Akeson said, "I don't believe Charles advised at any point that the loan funds he drew were being diverted from the specific uses he indicated in the initial draw request." Okay, let's go back to July 4th.
Mm-hmm.
I think I did.
Okay.
And I think Shaden knew I did. And I think I also made it abundantly clear that for the 6 months prior to that, we did everything we were told to do and had records of that by the CEO who had the authority of my draws and who approved a draw in June of 2023.
Yeah.
Also, I didn't have to ask permission anyway, because working capital by legal definition is the current liabilities of the business.
Okay.
I could have covered any cost and expense related to the operation that I wanted to without asking for permission. There was no stipulation in the contract that would have restricted me from making adjustments. So not only did I follow their instructions and follow the contract, what he's saying here is flatly false. Then he goes on to say that Jessica advised me verbally on more than one occasion that legal fees were not an allowable use of loan funds. I mean, I love that he even includes the word verbal because he has absolutely no proof, because the opposite is true. My attorney will even testify as a witness that she directed all of my activities into the legal fees under NDDF, knowing we were the only funding that we were operating off at that time.
Right.
Was state funding.
Yeah. In previous recordings, do we have some of that direction?
I think I've uploaded some things online that talk about it. So in the July 4th email, which is fully uploaded, as well as a June 6th or 7th email with a bank, it talks about the fact that Jessica actually directed and guided us through the lawsuit and told us we had to do it. And then on March 8th, there's a federal law enforcement report that says that the legal fees were specifically directed by Commerce.
Gotcha.
And again, just so everyone knows we're on the same page, that lawsuit you referred to was the one that was against Benchmark, correct?
It was to get the site cleaned up.
Yep, okay.
And then it was dismissed after settlements were sort of casually proposed to sizable amounts, like suggested amounts that we hadn't mentioned ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we had held it out a little longer, we could have. But when they started sabotaging our business in September of 2023, we had to drop the lawsuit because we couldn't even afford the month-to-month on it. So go to slide 20, and these are all the things they did against us. So they froze our loans for the second time starting October 2023, and that's been perpetual ever since. They still owe us money under the contract. They started a performance audit in October 2023, which they abandoned in December 2023. They alleged to a reporter misuse, blackmail, and extortion against me starting in October 2023, and then made it public. They pressed me to sign a backdated notary mortgage agreement titling the site to the state, which would have been a form of theft because they didn't have a right to it ahead of my other loan lenders anyway. It was my right to give. Then they investigated old board meeting minutes where I presented to get my loan approval, and this is in one of the internal emails that came from Dustin Galrilow's initial request that I had never seen before until some weeks back.
Okay.
Where they were actually looking for whether I had done anything wrong that could be used against me. Writing, we need to figure out how to get a position to Hoefer's assets. So they're busy alleging to the legislators that they had my assets at that time, but they knew internally they had no right to it, and they were trying to figure out how to allege something against me. Promoting news stories of misuse. Dave Lehman literally gleefully wrote, "Hey, I just found this one," something to that effect, and then finishes off, "Better late than never, LOL." And it was a misuse article published in the Bismarck Tribune that he found weeks after the original publications went statewide. And then they defaulted my loan in February of 2024 when it was in perfect standing with millions of dollars, over $5 million in immediate private funding and several million follow-on that would have come weeks later, and 3 years of term renewals left on the contract that were already pre-approved by the board and just required Shaden's signature. So they defaulted it out, which is an extraordinary reckless act against the taxpayer dollar because we were performing and we were paying. And I want to highlight how important that is, because surely the NDDF board would not self-deal with the state's taxpayer dollars, right? Surely.
You would think.
Surely not. Surely not in their own 2023 audit would there be $4.66 million of self-dealt loans to companies the board members have shares in. And
Indie Commerce has found its way into the news before.
Surely 3.16 million of that would not be already earmarked as a reserve for loss, prepared to write off.
Right.
Their whole portfolio in 2023 was over $14 million marked for write-off out of a little over $30 million in loans receivable. And then on top of that, they structurally charged off another over $7 million. So they're over 50%, far over 50% of their loans are written off and defaulted. And our loan was performing. So North Dakota taxpayers, the Department of Commerce has a performing loan, but they don't like the business. They will misuse taxpayer money.
Right.
Go ahead.
It's crazy to default perfect standing. If they were upset with it, it would even make sense. Like, hey, we don't feel like we did this. You need to go find alternative financing or something like that. But to go and put it to default is a very strong move.
And then at the same month they defaulted it, they sabotaged a deal that could have removed them.
Right. Yeah. That's the stuff that does not fully make sense to me.
Yeah.
Who wins with that stuff?
It's pure retaliation at that point. It's misuse of state office. It's misuse of state authority. And then where we're going to show next in these December recordings from December 2024 is they're misusing public confidence in their financial positions, trying to talk as though they're authorities, but making sure I'm, miles away from their statements so that I can't disprove them on the spot.
Yeah. Well, let's run through those fast.
Now you'll get to see us. Presentation is over. So
now we can't. Now, good thing I already drank everything in my water bottle.
Yeah, you're all done.
Still got mine.
Well, you can take a drink. All right. What?
These will go fast. So
which one do you want to go to?
I think
9?
we ended on 8, right?
Yep.
So what we'll do is play each one, and then I'll explain what it's saying and what it means after.
Here goes 9.
I spend more time on this project than any other project I've worked on in the development fund. So it's not for lack of effort, and I get to hear one side, so I understand there's other sides of the story that I don't hear. I haven't heard any tape recordings.
So there's Jim Albright, the chairman of the development fund, saying he's worked harder on this than any other project, right? Ever since he told me he supplied Benchmark, he's never spoken to me again. And I've only spoken to him for 5 minutes since my loan's been approved. So he's worked very hard on this particular loan, but he's only heard one side deliberately.
Right.
And he has not heard any recordings. So part of the reason we're sharing recordings today is to give the chairman of the development fund an opportunity to hear those recordings.
Fair.
Next.
But this hasn't been treated any differently than other projects, at least in my last 8 years with the development fund.
Again, the chairman, he treats us equal to every other project.
So every Commerce Department project has this same...
Every good paying project gets defaulted in good standing and chased out, right? Oh, no. I don't know. Doesn't sound right. I mean, well, if it is, then we have a real problem.
I would like to hear someone else that's gone through or worked with Commerce that has had a similar situation.
Have you looked up how many other ones have been defaulted based off misuse, or just
can't even find it? I mean,
it's not even.
I know I'm the only person who's been publicly accused of misuse in the 8 years of Burgum's administration. First of all, I'm the only person who's been publicly accused of any wrongdoing from Commerce. And that's a private business that was lending with them.
Right.
They haven't publicly accused another business. I mean, they gave $3 million to the Epic Water Park in Fargo.
Right.
In December of 2023. And then they defaulted it in the middle of 2024 quietly through their board minutes.
Interesting.
Number 11?
Number 11. So, right there, there's a point. Even right there, just shows a little bit of inconsistency. I understand that there's the obvious things, but just
it's going to get a lot worse. Yeah. This is just so basically.
Sorry.
Yeah, they play a confidence game with these legislators. They get 13 legislators in a room, including Senate Majority Leader David Hogue. They get me out of the room, and they just try to make sure people know, how we like Charles, but man, he's a shyster. Here's the facts. And that's pretty much what they spend the whole time. I had a legislator use the word shyster. She said, "We left feeling very uncomfortable about you."
Wow.
So, and that would be fine if true.
Yep.
But everything that they said that made that impression was completely false.
In that meeting, did they ever have any emails for display or recordings of anything that they...
Pure discussion.
Okay.
No documents.
Here we go.
Okay.
We've been engaged in a handful of conversations throughout the course of the year that different parties have expressed interest in different financial packages for the business. None of those have materialized to my knowledge in a commitment letter or term sheet.
Would you be surprised if Shade Nakeson had a $6.5 million commitment letter and a $5.475 million term sheet in his inbox around the time that he defaulted our loan?
Well,
and the term sheet was mutually signed and binding and was ready to go into final closing and contract in under 45 days.
I wouldn't be too surprised. I'd be a whole lot less surprised if they actually released their files.
Yeah, and then there were multiple deals over $5 million that were in writing. So he's telling them that there weren't, and that not to his knowledge, he knew about every one of them.
Yeah. Next one.
In February of 2024 of this year, the line of credit reached maturity.
Go to the next one as well.
13.
Even though this is on books in default because the maturity date has passed.
Okay, so he said February 2024, the loan reached maturity, and this loan is on books in default because the maturity date has passed. Why does that matter? That matters because he didn't bother to tell the legislators that I contractually had pre-approved 3 years of renewal options.
Right.
And that I had already met the terms for the renewal.
Gotcha. 14.
I even had motivated letters from my lenders asking them to just honor the renewal and stop wrecking the thing.
Right.
Commerce staff and Development Fund staff attended a ribbon cutting in July of 2023, so shortly after suggesting that units were going to start going out the door, we had attended a ribbon cutting there, recognized that there was very little assembly happening on site, and the inventory that was included as part of one of the draw requests didn't appear to be at that location.
As if I'm hiding the money in the inventory somewhere. First of all, his July 4th email, he knew Jessica had already redirected the money away from materials, and we needed more cash to get the rest of the inventory on site because of the costs of remediation burying us, and because we couldn't get the rest of our bank loans in forward position in order to finish setting up the project. Secondly, I mean, it's. Can you play just the beginning of the clip one more time?
Commerce staff and Development Fund staff attended a ribbon cutting in July of 2023, so shortly after suggesting that units were going to start going out the door, we had attended a ribbon cutting there, recognized that there was very little assembly happening on site.
Okay, pause there. Very little assembly happening, he said.
Mm-hmm.
They were fully prepped weeks ahead that they would just be seeing parts because that's all that could be done with the additional federal cleanup. And I was having to do federal interviews and all kinds of stuff, and I wasn't able to start just pushing everything ahead. And in the CBS local affiliate report, they said, first parts are being produced, and the commissioner was talking very positively about that step of progress. And then in the draft media reports that didn't go out because they cut off communications with us when we discovered their conflicts of interest, in those communications, they were stating first parts are being produced and units will be working out in the coming months. They knew that was the expectation, but then they've changed the narrative to the legislators who don't know better, who don't know that those are the records.
Right.
And I should say, I don't hide records. There's no contrary records that exist to contradict anything that I'm putting forward.
Yeah. He makes a point that sounds good, and that is winter ribbon cutting, which would suggest that there would be product flowing soon.
Yeah, and the actual word was soft opening. It was an opening of the facility, not a display of product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, we got 5 minutes left, so let's
just plow through these here.
What you promised, Jessica.
promised additional funds on recording. I've heard it on recording of giving additional funds to help him remediate his site. We have it on recording.
Okay, it'd be great if those can be provided.
November 2023, Shaden had them provided.
And if not then, they have been now.
Well, they were before. Were they provided before that
online
before that conversation?
That conversation was December 2024. November 2023, Shaden had them in his email.
Right. And December 2024.
It was a few months after November 2023.
Right. But they were also publicly put out there too.
Yeah, on your website.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there was much opportunity for them.
In that same month, June of 2023, I received an email from Mr. Hoefer, and that had suggested that things are now moving along as they should have been, and that they expect units to be completed by the end of the month.
You know what's so hard to listen to about that email?
That recording? Or
that recording and that email he's referencing? It never existed.
Yeah.
There was never an email written by me to Shaden Akison in June of 2023. In addition to that, there is no email or representation to anyone in the development fund that I would finish a unit in June of 23.
Right.
They had sheets on the ground a year and a half ago at the ribbon cutting. That's all they had. At that point, we met 6 months later and said, what does it take to get something done? I'm not saying he hasn't made progress, but he's been able to keep building, pay people, and get some things done. But the focus needed to be on getting a unit out the door. He agreed with that.
Okay, so the meeting 6 months later would theoretically be January of 2024, when their only intent was to default me, train wreck me, sabotage me, and their only communications were occurring through legislators. And they called my lenders in January 2024 asking if they supported the misuse allegation against me.
Mm-hmm.
They had no meeting with me.
Yeah.
I want to make that very clear. Neither in December, and in February, at the end of the month, they had a meeting and train wrecked a deal.
Okay.
So there was no representation there, and doing a unit would be wildly irresponsible with taxpayer money, because it would be $1 million unit because the inventory is so custom on this product.
Right.
That's the question we were asking a year ago. What does it take for you to be able to deliver a unit?
Here he's going again. Mm-hmm. He's saying in December of 2023, they were asking, what does it take to deliver a unit? No, they did not ask that, and I wouldn't have agreed to it.
Regardless.
If you're doing a development project, you can pay a lot more money to get one set of skins and finish out one unit, as opposed to getting all of the inventory to build out 10. If you think about project management, why didn't he do that? I don't know.
He doesn't know. He doesn't even know that I was funded as a production company, not a development project, because I did development 6 years overseas where it was 15 times cheaper.
You'd already done all of your R&D at that point.
Yeah, and on top of that, I built one more test unit. After I'd already built 6, I built one more overseas during the lockup with the facility here. He probably doesn't even know that.
Whose voice was that again?
Jim Albright, the chairman of the development fund.
Who spent more time on this project than the other ones?
He spent more time on this project than any other project he spent time on. And he is calling my project a development project instead of a production project because we already finished the development. We've already proven full-built demonstrators overseas, and we use the same methods. It's just more expensive to load up the site with machinery, equipment, and inventory, which we're still waiting on.
Yeah.
And we're hand-building whatever we can. Go ahead.
That he ran into extraordinary difficult situations. See, Commerce promised him a clean site. Yeah, it's clean, it's ready to go. Well, that wasn't true.
No, Commerce didn't promise a clean site. Commerce doesn't do due diligence on sites.
So that is Dave Lehman, who told me I had a clean site.
Nice.
It's so brave for him to go talk like that. Go ahead. One more. He says the same thing.
If you're a bank or anybody else lending on a commercial property, you're probably not going to know what's going on in that facility operationally.
Unless your name is on 4 years of site records.
Right.
And you ran and facilitated and funded aspects of the operations. I shouldn't say ran, but they were facilitating, they were funding, multiple defense projects, references to nuclear. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And Lehman was all over those documents.
Bro, I'm going to sell you a house. Okay?
Let's do
and
it.
It's going to be a clean site.
Okay. Then I buy the house.
You buy the house. And then it's not clean.
Rotting corpse in the basement.
Yeah.
Right.
And the police won't pick it up.
Oh. See, even if I sold you a house with a rotting floor, you could fix it.
Yep.
But if it's a rotting corpse,
all of a sudden, it's a different ballgame.
Military stuff I can't touch, sitting there from their project.
And that's one thing that's a little bit different about an outlier, very, very unique that not anybody else gets to run into, is that there's federal problems that are going on here.
Yeah, so here's where his statement falls apart, right? Is he saying, oh, you buy the building, you take the risk? Well, fine. You induce someone into a loan contract and you make material misrepresentations and omissions, you create fraudulent inducement. You allow for contractual rights to rescission.
So any of our comments here, I hope, aren't misconstrued as being negative toward any of this conversation.
That was Albright again.
Yeah. Hopes it's not being construed as being negative, which if they hadn't made over 75 lies and misrepresentations, maybe I would agree with that.
If we're really talking about the feds showing up with
This
agents,
is Senator Rep. Hoverson here.
A killing has happened in Minot, potentially related. So there's a real threat to personal life going on here. That's not a normal situation.
It was one of the arguments was they were trying to say every startup has its challenges.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Every startup, the owner gets threatened, chased,
not like that,
stopped,
though.
harassed. I mean, it's
a different. Yeah, it's a different level.
It was like out of reality, and the legislators were calling him out on it.
But do you admit, Jim, that he's had a really unusual happen to him?
I would say his circumstance is unusual, but you can look at most startup companies, and there are unusual circumstances.
Not to this degree.
Not to this degree.
No.
I won't disagree.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, he didn't disagree with that one.
At the end, when he was pushed.
So there's a disconnect in the stories here, and I've been there with him. He's actually done amazingly well this past year. I can't believe what he's done, and yet you guys don't see it. There's a disconnect, and I want to know why. What? He can't do anything right now, Jim. Can't. There's no money.
How has he stayed open for the last year and a half?
Family.
And we've been to his facility, and it's a great facility. It's cleaned up. It's great. And we saw the units. It's the capital. And why aren't we doing something? And my big question is, why isn't he here? There's no meeting with Charles and Commerce and other people.
So Jim, who followed this project more than any other project, says, how am I staying open?
Right.
Doesn't know. And then I don't know if you heard Senator Weston say family.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had various loans come in and a ton of family support to keep the lights on so that we can stay viable to close investments.
Right.
Some of the challenges have been Charles's approach to this group, as I've seen written documents and heard the conversation, comes with, or I'll take action, or I'll do this. So the guidance that our own legal department from the state is giving to this group is, be careful how you engage, because litigation is a potential outcome. And that's part of the reason that Charles probably isn't part of this conversation right now. I don't know that, but it's probably part of it, is so that everyone can get grounded on where things are at, and then how do we move this forward. Again, the support in this room for Charles is universal.
Universal support, but lied through his teeth about me saying, if you don't do this, I'll do this. So I've never once done anything like that, and there is no record that exists showing anything like that.
And again, if his universal support, all they would have to say is, your loan's not on default. We're going to take away this allegation of misuse funds, get different funding, though. And then you'd go get different funding, and you'd be all right?
Not anymore, because they tanked every deal we had that was good. So now they're going to have to fix that.
Right. But essentially...
Back then, I would have taken it.
Right.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, the extraordinary thing is he sits there and there's the confidence game, right? I've been advised to, basically give counsel to everyone in this room. Be careful, right? Be careful with Charles Hoefer. The guy makes threats. I've seen the document. I've seen the...
Yeah.
He said he saw it. What has he seen? And I'd like to see it myself.
And that's kind of the pause that I have.
Right.
If I'm scared for a year and a half, I probably took my family and got them the heck out of there and said, I'm going to walk away from everything.
So here, he's insinuating that I'm making up the dangers of the situation and saying if I was really scared, I should have just packed up and left.
Yeah.
Which goes back to that catch-22. Do you want to...
It goes back to that email where I tell Shaden I'm not going to destroy my reputation and walk away from this.
I'll say this from my perspective. The question about where is he getting his money from, I don't think that was a question of curiosity. I think it was more of a statement. It was a rhetorical question.
Frustration that I'm still here.
Frustration that you're still here.
Shaden said that to Senator Weston last summer. He said, how is he still here? They wanted me gone.
Right. But also potentially even questioning, like, where is he getting, if it's so bad off, then where is he getting his funding? How is he able to stay open? I think even a rhetorical question in that regard too.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not have been expecting the answer that he got.
So they're 20.
Where does it stand now?
Do 28. So,
I mean, because there's just no way, I mean,
pause 1 sec here. So this one.
You've come across it. There's no way that no one.
He just said if I leave, right, or if I'm really scared, I should have left a year and a half ago. So this recording is just over a year and a half ago from the CEO of the development fund.
So I'm guessing that a lot of people either came across and walked away before anything more could have come from it. But yeah, I'm not sure. But like I said, it takes a very strong person to go through what you're going through. And, like I said, it's not only you, it's also your family. And, that plays a huge role in it. So
Yep.
I don't know if I could have stood there as long as you are and tried to look through this, especially with my family on the back end of it. So.
Yeah, last night was the 7th or 8th stalking incident, and my wife and daughter were in the car with me, and it was unnerving.
Yep.
So.
Shows that the prior Jessica took was at that point sympathetic to your situation and understood why you were.
And Albright knows it.
Yep.
And I find his statements remarkably offensive and just throwing the risks that I endured in order to stay here.
Yep.
Insulting it to every possible level personally.
Here's the next one.
Where does it stand now? Whose name is on the building? Charles Hoefer?
That's Senator Magrum.
He has a mortgage on the building, yes. So his name is on the mortgage, and so. But if he were to, I think if I'm understanding what you're asking, if he decided he wants to go do this somewhere else, leave this behind, the local economic development groups in closing that loan would take over possession of the building and ownership.
And then the Commerce would write the loan off as bad loan?
If he left, we'd go through our normal collection actions. So if a borrower picks up, depends on the terms, right? In this case, you have somebody that has personal guarantee on it, so you hand it over to the attorney and initiate a collection action.
So, if I'm really scared, I should have packed up my family and leave. But if I leave, they're going to initiate a collection action on me personally and destroy my finances.
Right. Yeah. Catch-22 we were talking about.
The article where Commerce accuses them of misuse of funds is still out there, and any potential financer can just do a Google search, find that article, and that's going to tank the deal, it seems to me.
Being completely blunt, all the podcasts and articles in the last 3 months, any financial partner is going to look those up and not want to touch the deal. Respectfully, I think
I had a deal the next day after that recording.
I look up all of the things that have happened with that site. I'm probably not entertaining new finance.
And I hear that. I guess I'm most concerned with the comment that came from the North Dakota Department of Commerce.
Yeah, and
accusing someone of misuse.
I think we need to put that into context with respect to that reporter's engagement with Mr. Hoefer prior to ever coming to the development fund and asking specific lines of questioning and trying to prod and do certain open records requests to glean and try to create a narrative and a certain story.
So, why the misuse accusation? I want to be very clear what Shaden just said there. A reporter came from Charles, talked to Charles first, then talked to us, came with a specific line of questioning, specific narrative, prodding, making open records requests.
Right.
Those sound like normal things reporters do. Unless they're not allowed to do that in North Dakota. And then that gives North Dakota the right to destroy a business person's life and career.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, the rest of what he says here is just nuts.
With respect to how we've processed and supported the business, and any response was in direct response to a line of questioning with respect to he has existing funds available under this line, why isn't it being drawn? And we didn't say specifically misuse, we said we think that there's potentially misuse. And I understand the consequences that can have with respect to the financial partners, which again is why we've not taken collection action.
So this offensive line of questioning was questions about the business engagement and questions about why aren't you distributing the rest of the funds. Shaden, who already knew we'd done everything they told us to do, believes that since he said alleged misuse, that it's just okay to do that. Right. And then he says, well, I understand the consequences that it can have. Right. So we're not collecting. So what he's done is he's deliberately destroyed our ability to close deals, but he's not collecting.
Right.
But if I leave, he's going after me personally.
Yeah.
But if I stay, it's dangerous.
Him only saying that they allege that you have the misuse, that implies
it's
that
the same damn thing. I'm sorry for bringing it. It's no different.
Yeah, it implies that at this point they would have at least figured out that you are in good standing.
It implies that I'm a criminal.
Yeah, of course, but yeah, that's
I never misused a dime of it.
Exactly. No, that's the goal of the whole thing. No.
I mean, it's like, and by the way, his public news articles included the words blackmail and extortion.
Sure.
I was shocked when I saw an email from the reporter and he's like, what's your reaction to this? And he forwards me some of what Shaden wrote. And he's alleging blackmail and extortion baselessly. He doesn't even have anything on which he could allege it.
Here's the last one.
People that know about it at this point in time, that it's not just going to go away. I mean, I'm going to tell you this right now, Charles. If you and your family can leave tomorrow, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to go, oh, I guess he just gave up and he decided it was done. Like, no, there's a reason why you up and left, and that is the cause of concern that now I have to go, what happened, and now this continues to need to be looked at. Like, it doesn't get dropped. I mean, unless they're going to target everyone who's ever been involved or has been involved up to this point, and there's no way that they're ever going to be able to do that. Like, it's never going to just end until someone ends it by doing the right thing.
Right.
So, Governor Armstrong, I have a proposal on your desk crafted with legislators that ends this with the single stroke of your pen, results in no damages to the state, and a massive economic win for all of our communities. My communities have also motivated independent letters published to the Dakotan asking you to end this and do the right thing. I would like to meet with you and I would like to speak with you. And I guarantee you that when you sit down and talk with me, all you're going to realize is the wonderful opportunities that my project, my family, and my teams bring to North Dakota for RVs and other ancillary projects, including affordable housing in our region that are so sorely needed. And I would like to have that discussion and that opportunity quickly so that this does not continue. This isn't right. Here's your proof, and I need your help.
There we go. Well,
I think that's a fantastic way to wrap it up.
Yep.
We will obviously, of course, thank you. We will certainly be keeping our eye on this. We will be back with updates when or if we get them. And Charles, thanks for coming on and telling your story again.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank
you to everybody for watching this episode. Be sure to like and subscribe to the Dakota and become part of the community where we'll continue to bring you stories that matter to North Dakota. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.